This map, it shows. The advance is relentless.
Kalen returns to Ethelgard at dusk, riding along a cracked stone road, the distant line of the crimson fog smoldering on the horizon like a wound in the sky. The towers of the capital Valamir emerge in the fading light, yet no bells ring, no banners fly, only dark gaps like empty eye sockets. Valamir's gate hangs half open, chains slack, with no guards and no torches, as if the entire city left in a single night. Inside the walls, streets lie in silence. Shops shuttered, overturned carts scattered, and long streaks of dried blood half buried under dust. Along the main avenue, royal statues have had their faces smashed, leaving only bare stone thrones and scraped away names. Kalen looks up at the Valamir Palace looming on the hill, its rooftops scorched and strands of crimson fog drifting around its high windows like bloody cobwebs. The iron gate of the palace is twisted as if crushed by a giant hand, the wooden doors blown inward, hanging loose on their hinges. The once splendid audience hall now lies under a veil of dust, royal carpets torn to shreds, crossed by cracked lines of dried blood on the stone floor. Abandoned royal armors litter the hall, some still cradling dry bones within, helms shattered outward as if something burst from inside. On the steps leading to the throne, blood has congealed into dark, glossy streaks, as if even time itself has feared to touch it. The wall behind the throne is covered in ancient symbols carved deep into stone, the fresh grooves seeming newly made by blades and fingernails. Kalen recognizes some of the sigils as identical to forbidden ritual diagrams he once secretly read in the banned tomes of his ancestors. As dusk finally dies and darkness pours in through shattered windows, the crimson fog outside the city begins to rise like a tide. Tendrils of red mist slip through door gaps and wall cracks, crawling into the hall like slender fingers curling around chairs, pillars, and empty armor. Out of the mist, warped shadows solidify, limbs unnaturally long, faces smeared as if wiped away. These are the first sanguine terrors he ever sees. Kalen lunges forward and slashes the nearest monster, but his blade passes through its body like cutting smoke, only scattering the mist before it reforms. The sanguine terrors close in around him, moving with no footsteps, only the creak of joints and the cold breath of mist brushing his skin. A ghostly claw rips across his chest plate, throwing Kalen down the steps, his blood spraying brighter red than even the crimson fog. Lying on the cold steps, Kalen feels a searing heat surge through his veins, as if fire is burning along every vessel in his body. His blood spreads across the stone, then suddenly flares into a blazing red circle around him, like an ancient sigil drawn with royal life itself. The sanguine terrors recoil the moment they touch the blood circle's edge, their warped bodies shuddering as if burned before they retreat into the crimson fog. And that moment, Kalen understands the crimson fog does not merely want to kill him. It recognizes his blood like a voice calling the name of a lost sacrifice. He slowly climbs the blood-stained steps of his family, laying a hand on the cold throne, feeling as if he is touching the ashes of his own name. In the weak firelight, Kalen realizes the title he was summoned to reclaim is not merely rank, but a curse of blood and ashes laid upon all of Ethelgard. A murky dawn rises over Valamir, church bells silent while the drums of summons thunder, calling all royals and great lords to council inside the palace already stained by the crimson fog. Kalen stands before a cracked mirror in his temporary chamber, adjusting a dust-covered royal cloak, seeing in the reflection an exile wearing the colors of a dying dynasty. As he steps into the corridor, servants bow too quickly. their eyes skimming over him as if seeing an omen rather than a future lord. Along the path to the audience hall, new carpets have been laid over the stone, yet dark stains of blood still show at their edges, not fully scrubbed away. Before the carved wooden doors of the council hall, 2 rows of newly appointed guards in the colors of different great lords stand shoulder to shoulder, wearing their lord's emblems more prominently than the royal crest. When the doors swing open, a draft of cold air and heavy incense masking the scent of death rolls out, wrapping Kalen like a warped welcome. The audience hall glows dimly under oil lamps, rows of benches packed with royals and great lords whose cold eyes slice Kalen into pieces like merchandise. At the far end of the hall, below the empty throne, a lower chair has been set for the acting regent, who reclines with an unreadable, calculating smile. On the stone floor between them, the golden inlay of the royal crest is spiderwebbed with fine cracks that stretch toward the seats of the strongest factions. As the herald calls his name, murmurs swell like a hive of bees, the words cast off and last of the bloodline rising and falling among them. Through the tall, stained glass windows lining the hall, Kalen sees the crimson fog creeping up to the city walls outside, as if pressing its ear to hear every word spoken within. A corpulent great lord with gold rings on every finger leans over and whispers to his row that a carefully arranged marriage could bind Kalen forever. On the opposite side, a slender noblewoman with knife-sharp eyes murmurs about
the crown
accidentally resolving a few rivals if a royal name steps forward as a shield. Suddenly, the ring of armored boots echoes as the far doors open again, and a file of disciplined soldiers marches in, led by a familiar figure in a marshal's armor. Lyra enters in black and scarlet martial armor with a short cloak, helm tucked under her arm, her eyes cold as steel, sweeping once across the hall. In the instant their eyes meet, the world recedes and Kalen sees only the girl he once loved, now encased in the armor of the man who is his greatest political rival. Beyond the stained glass, the crimson fog suddenly coils higher, rippling in thin waves as if reacting to the invisible thread just retied between them. Lyra stops behind the chair of a young, ambitious duke, resting her hand on its back as if declaring herself the sword in his hand, not in the courts. Beneath the stiff collar of her armor, faint black vein-like lines flicker on Lyra's neck like roots, but when she lifts her head, they vanish again in the shadow of her pauldrons. The regent raises his hand and speaks in a warm yet razor-edged voice about how, with Kalen's suitable blood, the factions may at last find unity. And the hall blooms with smiles that never reach anyone's eyes. Throughout the council, veiled offers of strategic marriage, shared command, and restoring ancient rights are cast out, each phrase coiling another invisible chain around Kalen's neck. After the session, as the crowd scatters like well-fed crows, Kalen is guided through stone colonnades into a balcony corridor overlooking a misty courtyard where he sees Lyra waiting in the shadows. Lyra leans against a column, half her face in shadow and half lit by gray daylight, her eyes holding none of the warmth of the girl who once laughed with him beneath blooming orchards. Her voice is lower and rougher than before as she tells him to leave Ethelgard now if he wants to live, because here he is nothing but a key to unlock yet another hell. As Kalen steps closer, leaving only an arm's length between them, he clearly sees the black veins on Lyra's wrist swell and contract with her heartbeat like living sigils. He quietly says that if he runs, others will still use his name, his blood, and even Lyra as tools, and at least here he can choose how he is used. Lyra turns away, her cloak snapping like a streak of shadow, saying that next time she meets him it may be on the battlefield, and then her sword will not be allowed to know mercy. When her figure disappears behind the column, Kaelin remains alone on the high walkway, looking down at the city and seeing the crimson fog creeping deeper into the streets like a game board filling with pieces. He glances down at the mosaic floor beneath his feet, patterned like a vast chessboard, and realizes he is only a single piece still in royal colors among countless others stained by blood and fog. The imperial map lies spread across a stone war table in Valamir, a red smear for the crimson fog spilling over the border and encircling the tiny name. Fortress Edrion. Kaelin stands at the table's edge as silken voices suggest he lead the relief force, their eyes plainly saying, "Let the fog and its monsters do our dirty work." The regent lifts a goblet as if bestowing a favor, declaring that if Kaelin saves Edrion, his family's honor will be cleansed, and if he dies, he will be remembered, Kaelin's. Host leaves Valamir under a gray afternoon, faded banners fluttering weakly as they ride toward a horizon sliced in half by the crimson fog. The nearer they draw to Edrion, the thinner the trees grow, trunks scorched and leaves corroded into wet black strips. Fortress Edrion appears atop a gray rocky rises, its rough walls like a clenched fist raised above a sea of crimson fog lapping at the hill. At the hill's base, they pass rough-hewn stakes bearing dangling corpses of soldiers, bodies half-warped as if the fog had swallowed them halfway and spat them back out. Adrian's gate grinds open to reveal gaunt faces of garrison soldiers, eyes sunk from sleeplessness, armor blotched with old blood and fog burns. In the courtyard, makeshift cots line the walls where fog-touched soldiers crawl, skin marbled red and purple, some whispering to empty air as if hearing voices from beneath the earth. In Edrian's command hall, Kaelin steps into the scent of sweat, steel, and disinfectant, looking for the commander when he suddenly sees Lyra by the map table, hand pressed over the red circle drawn around the fortress. Lyra's martial armor hugs her frame, its edges darkened as if bathed in blood mist, and in her eyes is the faintest red gleam only someone once close would notice. The young Duke Lyra stands beside her, smiling politely yet hollowly as he declares she is sent to assist Kaelin and ensure all decisions align with the court's will. As night falls over Edrion, the fires on the ramparts burn weakly, casting light on the crimson fog churning below the walls like a sea of insects. Kaelin and Lyra stand side by side atop the wall, saying nothing as they watch shadows flicker in the mist, as if awaiting an invisible drumbeat to attack. The alarm horn tears through the night as elongated shapes begin latching onto the walls, climbing like giant centipedes made of flesh and mist. Arrows and spears rain down, piercing their bodies only to shatter the fog into shards that swiftly reform around charred branch-like bones. Kaelin rushes in to cleave a sanguine terror cresting the parapet, his blade catching a red fire from his blood, but the blow merely makes it scream and split out more arms of mist. The creatures close around one stretch of wall, dragging soldiers down with their long arms, the sound of snapping bones and choked screams swallowed by the rasping breath of the crimson fog. Lyra steps into the chaos, stripping off her gauntlet to reveal black veins running down her arm like charred roots, then clenches her fist as droplets of blood mist gather around her hand. From Lyra's hand, long blades of blood mist unfurl, curling around her wrist like a deathly flower, each petal a sharpened edge. She hurls herself into the cluster of sanguine terrors, each sweep of her arm cutting through both fog and bone, leaving red streaks that make the surrounding mist shudder like water struck by stones. With every strike, the black veins on her neck and temples swell, creeping closer to her eyes, and her breath becomes thin streams of mist that smell like rusted iron. The monsters begin to cluster away from where Lyra's mist blades strike, leaving gaps where the fog is torn open, exposing beneath it soil and stone blackened like charcoal. Then Lyra drops to one knee, clutching her chest as the black veins thicken into rope-like cords beneath her skin, twitching with a frantic heartbeat, and the mist blades in her hand begin to flicker. Kaelin rushes in and pulls her back behind the Merlin, his red aura flaring as if desperate to shield them both from the claws reaching in. A sanguine terror thrusts its face through a gap, but instead of striking, it pauses, and from that smeared void comes the voice of Kaelin's long-dead kin calling his name in the familiar cadence of the past. The voice whispers that royal blood is the key to the gate, not to shut the crimson fog away, but to open it fully into the world. Kaelin roars, his blade flaring red as he hacks, not at the creature's body, but at his own blood on the stone, detonating the sigil into a wall of light that shoves the fog back. Toward dawn, the crimson fog around Edrion ebbs like a tide, revealing at the foot of the walls a battlefield of corpses and twisted shapes, no longer clearly man or monster. Kaelin walks the ramparts, watching survivors clutch their heads at voices in the wind. Some with eyes turned pale red, bound and awaiting judgment. In the yard below, pyres are built, the bodies of soldiers and monsters heaped together. No one strong or brave enough to separate friend from foe anymore. In a small fortress chamber, Lyra lies on a narrow bed, armor removed, the skin below her collarbones etched with black veins like a net of sigils trying to climb her neck. Kaelin sits beside her, his own hand bandaged, watching the black lines twitch and recede each time she forces her breathing steady, as if two wills wrestle within a single body. In a hoarse voice, she says that this power is no gift but a chain, binding her heart to the fog, and each time she wields it, a piece of her is eaten away forever. Kaelin does not answer at once. He merely takes her wrist, feeling the black veins thrumming beneath the skin, and silently thinks that this power could save the Empire or kill the only person he still wants to save. That night, when Kaelin returns to the wall, the crimson fog on the horizon is only a thin band, yet he knows Edrion has merely weathered a single wave, and the true flood is coming along with the secrets of royal blood. A few days after the Battle of Idrion, Kaelin returns to Valamir to the sound of mourning bells, black banners hanging from the walls, and on the war map the red smear of the crimson fog has only shrunk a little before seeping deeper elsewhere like poisonous ink. In a secluded palace library, amid dust-coated shelves and cracked scrolls, Kaelin tracks down carefully hidden records, seeking every line that mentions the crimson fog. A trembling ancestral manuscript notes that Valamir's roots sink into our very veins, and beneath the city's roots lies the place where the fog was first summoned. In another scroll, he finds a faint diagram of spiral stairs descending beneath the palace, ending at a symbol of interwoven veins forming a circle. That night, Kaelin leads a small trusted group and Lyra quietly out of the guest quarters, slipping into the dark, seldom-used service corridors of the palace. They find a low iron door hidden behind a rotting tapestry, its lock furred with dust, above it a faded royal crest from which tiny lines spread like roots. When Kaelin presses his torn fingertip to the crest, a drop of blood smears the metal and the carved roots suddenly flare red like veins awakened. The door screeches open inward, revealing a black stone spiral stair leading down, exhaling a cold draft scented of ashes and long-dead incense. They descend so deep that the palace's noise vanishes, leaving only footsteps echoing off stone and the loudness of each heartbeat in their chests. At last, the stair opens into a wider corridor with a low ceiling, its walls lined with niches holding ancient urns sealed with wood impressed by the seals of past royal houses. Kaelin recognizes crests long erased from the surface. Lineages branded as traitors now lying here in peace beside honored kings. At the corridor's end stands a great stone door carved with reliefs of veins interlaced into an enormous upside-down tree, roots above, branches thrusting down into the earth. As Lyra's torch nears, the relief seems to move, the veins reflecting the torch's pale red as if a sleeping body lies just beyond the stone. Kaelin places his royal-blooded palm at the base of the inverted tree, the stone cold as ice. Yet beneath his skin, his veins blaze in response. The door shudders and splits along fine seams, red light seeping through like sunset buried underground for centuries. Within lies a broad crypt with a low arched ceiling, its walls covered in faded murals of an ancient Ethelgard raising its hands to heaven, welcoming the crimson fog as a divine blessing. One mural shows ancient kings upon an altar, the people bowing below, as the crimson fog pours from the sky like the palm lines of a giant god's hand. In the next scene, royal figures are led alone into a dark chamber to lie upon a vein-carved altar, while outside the people rejoice in victories won by the fog's power. An archaic script beneath the wall reads, "Each generation, one royal vein is given to keep the fog docile in Ethelgard's palm." Further along, the murals darken. The painted crimson fog turns brutal, shredding the city and devouring both king and peasant when a prideful ruler commands the altar destroyed. At the crypt's center stands a black stone altar, its surface deeply etched with intersecting circles of veins, the central depression stained a dark brown like layered dried blood. On a nearby stone lectern sit smaller engraved tablets recording the vein gate rite, naming two roles, the heart blood of the altar and the sword of the fog. The carving states that the heart blood must be royal lineage untainted, willing or unwilling, so long as the veins still beat upon offering. The next lines describe the sword of the fog as the one who bears the fog's mark upon their flesh, permitting their mind to be touched, becoming the hand that swings the cut, ending one royal life to save countless others. Kaelin and Lyra stand silent before the altar, needing no words to know they have just read their own names carved into fate centuries ago. In a smaller adjoining chamber, they find iron racks hung with archaic surgical tools, glass vessels of thick red fluid, and wall notes detailing fog hosts as substitutes for royal sacrifice. A rough sketch shows a human body carved with rune veins, black lines spreading from a cut at the chest, annotated, 17th trial, failure went mad, then self-immolated in the fog. Beneath it, another note reads, 23rd trial, female host, high resilience, fog response strong, corruption, progress slow, alive, the date matching the year of Lyra's birth. Lyra grips the stone table, eyes hollow as she realizes she was not chosen by chance, but is the sole survivor of a series of experiments to forge an artificial sword of the fog. Kaelin starts to lay a hand on her shoulder but stops halfway, finally saying that to him she is still Lyra, not Experiment 23, and not a tool of any empire. As they return to the main crypt, the crimson fog has begun to seep through cracks in the arched ceiling, fine threads of smoke weaving between the ancestral murals. Whispers rise from the walls, each voice offering a possibility. A newly unified Ethelgard ruled by fear, a throneless blood emperor, a world where the fog itself is law. The fog creeps closer to Lyra, wrapping her neck and shoulders like a cloak, its voice in her mind honey-sweet, suggesting that if she agrees, they can dispense with all royal sacrifices. Lyra staggers a step toward the altar, her eyes flaring a deeper red, lips forming ancient words she never learned. As if the fog uses her mouth to speak,
It's too
Kalen
late
hastily
for us.
slices his palm, drawing a blood circle on the stone around them both, ancestral sigils on the walls answering with a faint tremor. Where the blood touches, the fog recoils, tendrils curling like smoke and fire, and the voice in Lyra's mind cuts off, leaving an empty echo and her heart pounding painfully. Kalen leads Lyra away from the altar, retreating along the blood path, leaving behind a crypt still echoing with promises of power and ruin like an echo from Ethelgard's future. As they pass the urn-lined corridor again, some wax seals seem more cracked, as if even their ancestors have heard the fog's offer and now wait to see what they will choose. When they reach the iron door behind the tapestry, palace light slams into their eyes, gold and marble suddenly flimsy and hollow beside the black altar still burned into their minds. Kalen lets the tapestry fall, hiding the entrance to the royal vein crypt, knowing he is no longer merely fighting monsters but now carries in his mind the blueprint to either save or destroy Ethelgard. Rumors of the Vein Gate rite begin to seep through Valamir like smoke through cracks, from filthy taverns to the marble foyers of the palace. Anonymous scraps sketching the black altar and the 2 rolls of heart blood and sword appear on gambling tables in secret councils and even in the hands of servants collecting trash. In the great hall, the regent tries to dismiss it all as baseless gossip, but the shouting of royal branches rises like a pack of wolves fighting over the scent of blood. A long, silent royal branch steps forward with a thick genealogy proving their purer blood, claiming Kalen's line is merely collateral and fit only as an offering, not as the one who decides. On the young duke's benches, advisors murmur about seizing Lyra as the sword of the fog, regardless of her will, while the heartblood can be negotiated by capturing Kalen alive. Outside, the crimson fog has pressed up to Valamir's walls, turning the western dusk into a thick red band like a slit across the city's throat. In the streets, people trade half-true tales that sacrificing the right person will make the fog recede, and someone always whispers Kalen's name as the answer. On walls in the slums, charcoal drawings appear of a headless man wearing a cracked crown standing in a sea of fog, beside a female warrior whose hand burns with red fire.
Your name.
In the war room, Kalen is dragged into endless arguments over prioritizing a path to the altar or withdrawing troops to protect civilians. And every decision he proposes is shredded by factional ambition. The regent, now gaunt and hollow-eyed, fearing both the crimson fog and his own loss of power, quietly suggests a limited rite that sacrifices a lesser royal branch instead of a publicly prominent figure like Kalen. At the same time, the young duke quietly orders his men to muster a private force within the city, ostensibly to protect order, but truly to seize Lyra and control the rite. Lyra, torn between her lord's orders and the truths uncovered in the crypt, stands alone in the training yard, watching the crimson fog cling to the towers like a crown of blood. In her mind, the fog's whispers grow clearer, painting visions of her seated beside a red throne, feet on a pile of bones, not as a tool but as queen of a new empire. That night, small fires erupt in granaries and guard posts across the city, and alarm bells for insurrection mingle with horns on the walls calling monster attacks. The great lords march their private troops into the Kir, streets raising barricades and seizing gates, turning Valamir into a bloody chessboard where royal banners stand mingled among dozens of others. In the central square, crowds tug at banners, one side accusing Kalen of bringing the fog, the other chanting for his coronation to force the fog to kneel. Kalen must choose between sending troops to protect the burning slums or concentrating forces to carve a path to the ancient temple for the altar. And he orders a turn toward the flames despite some captain's shouted protests. Lyra receives secret orders from the Duke. If Kaelin refuses the plan to reach the altar, she must seize or kill him to save the Empire from weakness. The crimson fog inside her mind cheers in echo to that command, whispering that if she spills Kaelin's blood on the altar, the fog will let her live forever atop the ashes of all dynasties. In a narrow alley near the square, Kaelin and Lyra face each other amid screams and smoke, while their troops fight to keep a path open for civilians fleeing collapsing, burning homes. They argue briefly in the battlefield din. Lyra insists that without the right now, the fog will devour the city, while Kaelin answers that an empire left only with altar and throne is nothing but a walking corpse. Rebellion horns blare from the square as the Duke's forces clash with a rival royal faction, with a cluster of panicked civilians trapped between them like pieces that belong to no side. Kaelin charges into the square using his own troops as a living shield between the factions, shouting orders to form ranks before the people, forcing both spears and arrows to hesitate for a moment. Lyra, pushed by the fog and orders, steps out between the lines, drawing her blood-mist blade, and in her sight, Kaelin becomes nothing but the knot that must be cut. She rushes with inhuman speed, mist blade aimed at Kaelin's throat, black veins across her face sketching the mask of a corrupted war goddess. Kaelin does not dodge, only stepping half a pace to turn the stroke into his shoulder, his blood spraying in a red arc as he reaches to pull Lyra into an embrace while her blade still glitters with mist. His blood spills onto the stones around them, flaring again into a red sigil circle, and the fog around Lyra jerks back as if yanked off a puppet's wrist. Lyra trembles as the mist blade crumbles into smoke, her mundane sword clattering from her hand, and she realizes she has nearly killed the only man who dared bare his throat to her without conditions. Around them, both armies fall silent, spear points lowering as they see Kaelin's blood shine, and the crimson fog overhead seems to pause its swirling for a single shared breath. After that, the civil war does not end, but the clash breaks apart into skirmishes retreating down other streets, leaving the square strewn with bodies and dimmed red smears. In the palace, an assassination blast collapses an entire wing, taking many schemers and perhaps the regent with it, leaving the throne vacant and cracked beneath a layer of stone dust. Kaelin enters the half-collapsed great hall, gray light pouring through the broken ceiling, falling upon the golden crown lying on the floor with a crack running straight through it. He bends to pick up the crown, finding it lighter than the invisible chains awaiting him on the altar, yet heavier than any title he has ever borne. He sets it upon his head despite blood still running from his shoulder down his arm, so that anyone entering sees a king without coronation, only a fractured crown and a shattered hall. Before the remaining generals, great lords, and panicked envoys, Kaelin declares that if the right must be done, only he will decide when and where he dies, not any book of genealogy. He adds that a fractured crown is the only fitting symbol for an empire that traded its soul to the fog, and if a price must be paid, he will pay with his own body rather than throw more lives into the fire. In the wind howling through the hole in the roof, Kaelin grips the crown on his head, gazes toward the ancient temple beyond the city, and knows that from now on every step he takes will lead him closer to the altar where the bloodied title awaits his own full stop. At dawn on the fated day, Valamir lies under a thin veil of mist, no church bells ringing. Only slow, drawn-out drums announcing that the last host is leaving the city. Kaelin wears dented armor, shoulder wound still bandaged. The cracked crown on his brow, eyes fixed on the horizon where the ancient temple lies, shrouded in red light. Beside him, Lyra rides in silence, helm shadowing half her face, black veins on her wrist wrapped in cloth, yet beneath it the fog still pulses like a second heart. They pass abandoned villages, ruined houses, fields of blackened stubble, survivors staring at the marching army with empty eyes, unsure whether to offer blessings or curses. The closer they draw to the temple, the thicker the crimson fog becomes, the sky turning into a dome of red-gray cloud as if the whole world were leaning down to watch them. The ancient temple appears on the brink of a deep chasm, cracked stone foundations and leaning pillars, surrounded by a vortex of crimson fog rising from the abyss like a column of blood smoke. Their remaining soldiers form a shield wall at the entrance, holding off endless sanguine terrors spilling from the fog's edge, each warrior knowing they are buying time with their own bodies. Kaelin and Lyra pass through their lines into the temple's heart, where stone pillars carved with veins rise on either side, the red light of the fog turning them into throbbing lines of living tissue. The black stone altar sits at the center of the temple floor, surrounded by familiar circles of rune veins, identical to those in the royal vein crypt but larger, deeper. On the arched ceiling, an almost intact mural shows a king lying on the altar, surrounded by hazy shapes of fog bowing, like gods, hands lifting both a crown and chains at once. The crimson fog here is so thick it feels liquid, coils around their ankles and wrists, whispering individual words in hundreds of voices, calling both Kaelin's and Lyra's names. Kaelin steps onto the altar and removes the cracked crown, setting it beside him as if laying down something that no longer belongs to the one about to lie there. He looks at Lyra and says that his whole life he has never chosen anything that mattered, but this time he chooses the altar himself, not for the court, but for the people out there who have nowhere left to go. Lyra chokes out that she doesn't want a saved world without him, that she is exhausted from being used as a blade, whether by the fog or the Empire. The fog intrudes on her thoughts, inserting another idea. If she cuts the chains of the right instead of Kaelin's heart, they can merge with the mist together, becoming twin-blood sovereigns ruling over the ashes. Kaelin recognizes that distant look, takes her hand, places the real sword in it, and quietly says he needs her to be the true sword, not the queen of any nightmare. He climbs up and lies on his back on the altar, stone cold seeping into his bones, rune circles around him lighting one by one like steps of a staircase descending into an unseen abyss. The crimson fog coils above him into a funnel, and from it the choices are spoken clearly.
You'll do this.
Sacrifice so the fog will recede or merge with it to become the Red Emperor ruling a monstrous empire. Around the temple, the cries of dying soldiers fade, each shield falling against stone, ringing like a countdown to the final decision. Lyra raises the sword, point trembling in the air, her voice breaking as she asks why it must always be royal blood that pays, why the world cannot sink this time along with the monsters. Kaelin smiles faintly and says he is not paying because of his bloodline, but for those who no longer call him prince yet will die if he lies still and does nothing. He adds that if anyone deserves to be freed from the fog's chains, it is Lyra, who was never asked whether she wanted to become the sword. In that moment, the fog surges within Lyra, showing her two futures, one, where she stands beside Kaelin on an endless red throne, and one where she stands alone on broken stones holding the cracked crown. She chooses the second by exhaling slowly, stepping half a pace back from the mental precipice the fog has opened, then walking to the altar with footsteps heavy as stone. Lyra whispers an apology, not only for the stroke to come, but for all the time she let herself become a weapon in others' hands, then lifts the sword high once more. The stroke falls, swift and clean in the fog, screams like a storm being torn apart as the red column shatters into 1,000 shards of light, raining down and vanishing into the stone like evaporating blood. Outside, the crimson fog across Ethelgard begins to retreat like a reversed tide, revealing cities, villages, and fortresses clawed and torn yet still standing, exposing corpses of monsters and men mingled together. On the altar, Lyra kneels beside Kaelin's body, the blood-smeared sword resting on the stone, the cut having silenced the rune veins around him completely. In Lyra's eyes, a thin red spark still burns, no longer the fog's call, but the scar of having been touched too deeply by it, something that will never fully fade. She kisses Kaelin's forehead, then carefully lifts the cracked crown from the stone, not placing it on her own head, but holding it in her hands like the half-burned relic of a dynasty. When Lyra walks out of the temple, the sky above has paled from red, only streaks of gray clouds remaining, and at the hill's foot the surviving soldiers look up at her, as at something that has both saved them and killed their king. News spreads across Ethelgard that the fog has withdrawn, that a king died on the altar, and people begin to call Kaelin the throneless blood emperor, who traded his crown for ashes so others could live. The court is too broken to crown a new king, leaving only provisional councils, fragile accords, and a cracked crown on the table as a reminder that all power has been touched by the fog. Valamir is slowly cleared of monster corpses and its walls repaired, but the charcoal murals in the slums gain a detail. The headless man now bears the name Kaelin, and the crown in his hand is shaded with a deep crack. Lyra, carrying the cracked crown in a wooden box, leaves Valamir on a gray morning, passing fields being replanted among peasants who bow their heads with both respect and wariness. At night, by a small forest fire, when she removes her gauntlet, she sees the red glint in her eyes reflected in the water of her bowl, reminding her that the fog has not vanished, only changed its dwelling. Yet the whisper in her head has changed. No longer a lure to power, but the echo of a promise, that she will not use Kaelin's death as an excuse to build another empire on ashes. The tale of the bloodied title becomes a warning told to Ethelgard's children, that any empire daring to summon powers beyond human reach will pay with its own heart. And in a far corner of the world, on a stony hill overlooking freshly reclaimed fields, a lone woman in a worn cloak stands holding a cracked crown, quietly watching the horizon as if guarding against any fog that dares return.